Boker Tov. It's hard not to smile when I see all of you, and because you're here, and it's great to have so many folks here. It's also great that hundreds of families are joining us online as well at this very moment. And it's okay to smile on this day. That's important. In our ritual calendar, today is to be the most joyful day of the year, actually. It's a day of renewal. In our tradition, it was the day on which the second tablets were given. So don't be afraid to smile. It might get harder to smile as the day goes on, but in these moments, in this sunlight and in this place, it's okay to smile. Speaking of sunlight, if throughout this day you are ever uncomfortable, the sun is going to shift. You can shift too. Pick up your chairs even, move into the shade. Whatever is best for you, you should do. We want you to be comfortable in the course of this day. I also want to clarify one thing. Everything is fine with our cantor. Our cantor right now is down at, soon we'll be leading a service at Mitchell Park for our families that begins at 10 o'clock. She'll be back with us for the late service, but we are very lucky to have, of course, our Rabbi Weissman, leading us in her own right on this morning. I'm also thrilled, of course, to be here with Heath Wademaker, and we're so excited to be together with you. If you do not have our machzor in your home, you might want to go to our website and connect to the link to the flip book, because we're going to need these throughout the day. This is our guide for our trek that begins right now with the singing of Ma Tovu on page 138.
Ma Tovu, Ma Tovu, Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael, Ma Tovu, Ma Tovu, Ohalecha Yaakov. משכנותיך ישראל, משכנותיך ישראל.
On this day, when we are especially conscious of our mortality, we should celebrate our wonder, and the joy of being alive. And we do so through the singing of Psalm 150 on page 170. Please rise if you are able for our call to prayer, the Baruch Hu on page 178.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Join with me on page 181 in the middle of the page. Like an unbroken current, Energy streams from the source, bathing the planet in light, calling forth life, movement, mind unfolding from matter, the power to love. And we offer it back to you, our own creative energy, ever dreaming, building, shaping patterns out of chaos, searching out light in the darkness. Creation never ceases, not for an instant. All life is aglow with your light. All things draw sustenance from the source. Baruch atah Adonai, Yotzer HaMe'orot. Page 186. Please be seated. And we continue with the V'ahavta on page 188. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavecha v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'eleh Asher Anochi Metzavecha Hayom Alevavecha Vishinantam Levanecha Vidibarta Bam Vishivtecha Bevetecha Uvlechtecha Vaderech Uvshochbecha Uvkumecha Ukshartam leot al yadecha, vehayu letotavot beineinecha, uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha, uvisharecha, leman tizkeru, vasitem et kol mitzvotai, V'tem kedoshim leloechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim. Liot lachem Elohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Adonai Elohechem emet. We sing of redemption, Micha Mocha, page 196. Micha Mocha Bailim Adonai, Micha Mocha Nedar HaKodesh, Torah De'ivo, Osef Eleh, Shira Chadasha, Shibechu Geulim, Leshimech al Svatayam, Yachad Kulam, Hodu V'him Lichu Ve'ameru. Adonai Yimloch Le'olam Va'ed. Sur Yisrael, Uma Be'ezrat Yisrael, Uvteichinu
Klal Yisrael.
The Tefillah begins on page 198, and let us lift up our voices and try and drown out whatever's going on down there, all right? Join with us.
Adonai Svatai Tiftach, Adonai Svatai Tiftach, Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha, Ufi Yagid Adonai Svatai Tiftach, Adonai Svatai Tiftach, Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha, Ufi Yagid Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Avraham Bezrat Sarah. Ata Gibor Leolam Adonai Mechaye HaKol Ata Rav Lehoshia. Baruch atah Adonai Mechaye HaKol.
Amen. On page 208, we turn to the words of Unatana Tokef. You can be seated.
Unatana Tokef Kedushat Hayom Ki hu nora ve'ayom uvotina se malchutecha ve'yikon bechesed kisecha ve'teshev olav be'emet.
Let us proclaim the power of this day, a day whose holiness awakens deepest awe and inspires highest praise for your dominion. For your throne is a throne of love, your reign a reign of truth. Continue on page 212.
Berosh Hashanah Yikatevu Uvyom Som Kippur Uvyom Som Kippur Yechatemu Berosh Hashanah Yikatevu Uvyom Som Kippur Uvyom Som Kippur Yechatemu.
Let's read together at the bottom of page 212. On Rosh Hashanah, this is written. On the fast of Yom Kippur, this is sealed. How many will pass away from this world? How many will be born into it? Who will live and who will die? Who will reach the ripeness of age? Who will be taken before their time? Who by fire and who by water? Who by war and who by beast? Who by famine and who by drought? Who by earthquake and who by plague? Who by strangling and who by stoning? Who will rest and who will wander? Who will be tranquil and who will be troubled? Who will be calm and who tormented? Who will live in poverty and who in prosperity? Who will be humbled and who exalted? But through return to the right path, through prayer and righteous giving, we can transcend the harshness of the decree.
Please rise.
Teshuvah tefillah, tzedakah, ma'avirin et or tazezerah.
Continue on page 218.
Nekadesh et shimcha ba'olam, Nekadesh et shimcha ba'olam, Kishem shemakdishim oto b'shmei marom, kakatuv al yad neviyecha v'karazel
To continue now with your own private prayer. can use the words on the page through page 250, the words on your heart, or just use this time to listen to the beautiful sounds of this campus. Once you've finished your own private prayer, you can be seated. Page 246.
Malkeinu, Avinu, kulanu kechad beor panecha, ki beor panecha, natata lanu Adonai Eloheinu, Torah Chaim ve'ahavat chesed u'tzedaka u'veracha ve'rachamim ve'chayim ve'shalom. Sim shalom, sim shalom, Torah יקום וברוך שמו.
עושה השלום.
אמן. אמן.
We just prayed for peace that only God can provide. And then there's the peace that an executive director can engender by speaking to our neighbors. All these pieces are fragile. Peace is fragile, so we'll see if this peace holds. Azibaka kashacha orecha, v'aruchatecha mehera titzmach. Then your light will cleave like the dawn, and your healing will spring up quickly. I love these hopeful words from Isaiah. They are embroidered on my talit. Before preparing for these high holidays, however, I hadn't explored the word for healing in this verse, arucha. We are more accustomed to the word refuah or refuah shlema, a complete healing. But arucha is unusual. It appears only 6 times in the Bible. Metaphorically, arucha refers to the new flesh that grows at the wounded spot. It is the tender skin revealed when a scab falls off. Arucha also shares a root with the Hebrew word for long or lengthy. And this has been a long year of waiting for healing. Scabbed, fragile, fractured, wounded. We have gathered together on this day in person and online. Azibaka kashacha orecha v'arucha techa mehera titzmach. These words are from this morning's Haftarah, Isaiah's critique of the Yom Kippur practices of his time. It includes this well-known admonishment. Is such the fast I desire, a day for men to starve their bodies and for lying in sackcloth and ashes? Do you call that a fast? No, this is the fast I desire, to unlock the bonds of wickedness, to set free those who have been crushed. It is to share your bread with the hungry and to take the wretched poor into your home. When you see the naked, to clothe them and not to ignore your own kin. Then, like the dawn, your light will cleave and your healing will spring up quickly. Then, when you call, God will answer. God will cry, Hineni, here I am. And here we are. It is so good to see you and to know that so many others who could not risk being here with us are online. Back on Friday night, July 2nd, which feels like a very distant memory, I thought we'd be seeing so much more of each other. Perhaps you were here on that beautiful evening. For the first time since March 2020, we had reopened our campus for Kabbalat Shabbat, and we began to reopen ourselves to one another. Believing we had emerged from the darkness of this pandemic, we recited Birkat HaGomel, the blessing for having passed through danger. But now, once again, it is risky to enter this sanctuary, to come together in our synagogue. According to the Mishnah, 7 days before he entered his synagogue on Yom Kippur, the high priest was placed in a type of quarantine. He was separated from his family and brought from his house to a room in the temple designated specifically for him. The night before Yom Kippur, last night, the high priest was kept occupied to prevent him from sleeping, or so the Mishnah states. If he was a scholar, he would teach Torah. If he was not a scholar, Torah scholars would teach Torah to him. During that long night of study, the high priest was reminded that the Torah reveals its wisdom through binary pairings that communicate an encompassing totality: heaven and earth, God and human, curse and blessing. Usually, when you don't understand one concept in the Torah, you just need to read more, to read further, until you encounter the first idea's pair, its clarifying complement, a second concept serving to define the first, while the first does the same for the second. According to Genesis, the whole world was in disorder, tohu vavohu, tumult. But then God came along and made separations. God made pairs: water, land, night, day, separate but bound entities that together comprise a deep, coherent structure judged as good and very good. This is a priestly worldview. The priests had this thing about pairs: kosher, treif, pure, impure, sin, atonement. Throughout the week, when he was separated from his family, the high priest would have boned up on this expiation ritual for Yom Kippur: a pair of goats. One was consecrated to God, sacrificed on the altar, its basar, its flesh consumed by the priest. And one was made the scapegoat, upon which the high priest will lay the transgressions of the people and set it free to wander in the wilderness. To see the worldview of the priestly writers of the Torah is to see much, not all, but much of our world and so much of ourselves. It is to see, too, the coherence of the 10-day period that we are concluding today and our purpose in gathering here and online. For in this totality, ritual is the binary pair of story, one the clarifying complement for the other. If we can better understand our stories, then we can better understand who and where we are and what precisely we are doing here on this day. Here's a one-verse story. It says in the book of Genesis, Ya'azov ish et aviv ve'et imo, v'davak be'ishto. An individual leaves his parents and cleaves to another. One does not become one with another. One cleaves to another. The verse continues, V'haya levasar echad. And they become, it's not one flesh, as it is often translated. Basar doesn't mean flesh in this instance. Here, basar likely means kin, or better, relationship. V'hayu levasar echad. The two become one relationship. In this conception, two separate entities, two individuals cannot become one. Instead, they can bind themselves together, cleave to one another, be the clarifying complement for the other. In Judaism, relationships reveal wisdom through binary pairings that communicate an encompassing totality. Without injustice, there's no justice. No sanctity without mundanity. No Shabbat without the other 6 days. There's you and there's me and there's you. And we need each other in order to fully comprehend who each of us is. When the light of dawn cleaved the darkness on the morning of Yom Kippur, the high priest knew it was going to be the most exhausting, most dangerous day of his year. It is a day for communal recalibrations and for new beginnings. He will lead rituals and make offerings designed to ensure for another year the continual outflow of Kedushah, of holiness, from the epicenter of his community, the temple. And he will enter its core, the Holy of Holies, a room designated specifically for God. Its entrance, screened off and obscured by incense. It's a small space, God's abode on earth, into which the high priest and only the high priest would enter just once a year, on Yom Kippur, to atone for his people and to pray for their welfare in the new year. The Holy of Holies was a dangerous place to enter. To safeguard himself and to prevent impurities from contaminating the temple's most sacred precinct, He will wear his personal protective equipment, a layer of white linen, and over that, the golden garments of the high priest. He dresses in the garments, and a rope is then attached to his ankle, so that should he die in the Holy of Holies, he could be pulled out. After he sanctifies his hands and his feet, with hope and fear, the high priest delicately moves aside the curtain that screened off the Holy of Holies to see if God was there. And then he carefully goes in to draw as close to God as humanly possible. 10 days ago, we read a story about making offerings and drawing closer to God. In this way, the Akedah is a spoiler. The binding of Isaac binds together Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur because what we read last week, we enact ritualistically today. After these things, the story begins, Ha-Elohim nisa et Avraham. God tested Abraham. Realize that the language of nisa is different from the language of mitzvah. Testing is not a command. It is not commanding. Testing is testing. You can walk away from a test. Yes, this is the story of a father willingly offering up his beloved son for sacrifice. And yes, it does seem that they sacrificed children in ancient Israel. Child sacrifice. The Akedah is partially about that. Mostly, though, the binding of Isaac is a story about choice and risk, relationships and blessing. For Abraham, the story presents a moment of choice and ultimate commitment. Commitment means to give something up, to say no as you are saying yes. We all know that. We know, too, that commitment entails risk. And I need to say a word now about sacrifice, so we can understand better what we are doing together on this day. To understand that, you need to know this. In the sacrificial system, the offering, a ram, a goat, is a representation of the offerer. When the priests arrange the parts of an animal on an altar, they place them in a pyramidal mound, with the animal's procreative organs and its intestines at the summit. The Bible locates the emotions and intellect in the innermost parts of a body. Thinking happens in the heart. Compassion, according to the Bible, resides in the bowels. Now, we know as moderns that we think with our brains, but like our biblical ancestors, we know too that we also make decisions in our guts. So the animal's innards, exposed at the top of the sacrificial mound, represent the innermost part of a person, their life force, their fears, thoughts, and aspirations. The Akedah is a truly dramatic story because commitment and risk are taken to an extreme when Abraham offers up, in biblical terms, the fruit of his loins. His child, who, as with our children, represents his most closely held aspirations and fears. It is a truly dramatic story. But sometimes what we read is a traumatic story. And in our important sensitivity for the feelings of the characters, the outcome of the story becomes obscured. Abraham offers everything, yet he loses nothing. He loses nothing and gains so much. By choosing to not walk away from risking commitment, Abraham secures a blessing for him and for his progeny. Risk intertwined with reward. That's what covenant is. The binding of Isaac takes place in a particular location. After sacrificing a ram instead of his son, the story states, Abraham named that place Adonai Yireh, from which comes the present saying, Bahar Adonai Yireh, on the mount of God where God is seen. Scholarship reveals that Adonai Yireh is another name for Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. The story of the binding of Isaac, therefore, is set in Jerusalem, on the Temple Mount, Har Adonai, God's mountain. Even more precisely, it takes place where the Holy of Holies would be built, the place where God is seen. The Akedah, then, is part backstory explaining why Jerusalem, Why was the temple built there? How did that place become the central location in Jewish history and myth? There's a midrash that clarifies this scholarship. It reads, "The land of Israel is at the center of the world, and Jerusalem at the center of the land of Israel. The temple at the center of Jerusalem, and the Holy of Holies at the center of the temple. The ark is at the center of the Holy of Holies, and the foundation stone from which emerged the entire world is in front of the Holy of Holies." The Midrash suggests that the binding of Isaac occurred at the mythic epicenter of the world, the binding point of everything, where creation began, where God and humans meet, in the Holy of Holies. That's where Abraham made his offering. The Midrash also elucidates further the priestly view of the world. For them, the temple and the world existed in an intimate and intrinsic relationship. The two projects could not be disengaged. Professor John Levinson wrote that about ancient understandings of the temple, but that's what I'd say about Beth Am and about our world too. What happens here within our congregation is intrinsically linked to what happens beyond it. Our temple and our world, a binary pairing, one the clarifying complement for the other. Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav used to say, "Everywhere I go to Jerusalem." Metaphorically, today we get to go to Jerusalem. Our synagogue, like all synagogues on this day, representative of the temple that once stood in Jerusalem. And this outdoor chapel, today it is our Holy of Holies, the binding point of hope and fear, our past and our future, of risk and reward, of who we are and who we want to be. In our Jewish world, everyone can enter the Holy of Holies, the place where God may be seen. Our power here, equivalent, each of our voices equivalent on this day, in seeking blessing for ourselves and for our community. We all have equal access to the divine. And more than on any other Yom Kippur in our lifetimes, entering our Holy of Holies on this day entails risk. For those of us who are able to be here, and for those who are not here with us, our experience quietly reverberates with the trepidation and the hope conveyed by the stories of Abraham and of the high priest entering the Holy of Holies in his temple. For them, God was an external reality, the one who gives life and the one who takes it away. For me, and I imagine for many of us, divinity is discovered within, sanctity revealed through our human relationships, through being in each other's presence. Whereas the high priest donned his PPE to protect himself from God, on this day, to draw close to one another here in our Holy of Holies, we wear our PPE to protect ourselves from ourselves. And we don't need to look past our mask-covered noses to see a potent symbol of our capacity to harm and to heal. And here we are. In person and online, we are together. Survivors of a year of tohu vavohu, tumult, wounded from this grinding pandemic, made fragile from an historic spike in anti-Semitism, still scabbed from an insurrection in our capital. From 20 years of a failed war, we are scarred, and we are here, gathered together in a synagogue inextricably linked to the world. Although we have done a very good job preventing COVID-19 from spreading in the midst of our community, other societal ills have penetrated to the core of this house of the people. Our relationships further attenuated by the polarization and misinformation that has cleaved America, and, like incense in Jerusalem's temple, obscure our vision of one another, making it difficult to comprehend who each of us is. But today is for recalibrations and new beginnings, a sacred occasion to recovenant with one another and with God, to cleave ourselves from the mistakes of the past year, and to cleave to one another. And in a few moments, we will read a haftarah that critiques our power to harm and encourages us to harness our godlike capacity to heal, to bring order to the tohu vavohu in our world. Az yibaka kashacha orecha, v'arucha techa mehera titzmach. These hopeful words of Isaiah are the conclusion of a conditional if-then statement. This is Isaiah's then to these well-known ifs. If you unlock the bonds of wickedness, if you share your bread with the hungry, if you house the homeless and clothe the naked. But there is one more if leading to Isaiah's then. And it took the experience of a pandemic. It took more than a year of not fully being able to see so many of you in your entireties, in your three dimensions, and for you to not fully see me in mine. It took a recognition of abrasions that I may have caused to any of you during my first year as your senior rabbi. It took all of that and the need to write this sermon to clearly see for the first time the ultimate if, the three-word statement that immediately precedes the then embroidered on my talit. 3 words. Mi bisarcha lo titalam. Do not hide from your basar. As in the one-verse story from Genesis that I told you at the beginning of this sermon, the word basar does not mean flesh here either. It means kin, or better, relationship. Do not hide from or ignore our relationships, for we need each other in order to fully comprehend and to discover who we are, both as individuals and as a community. In our tradition, our sacred stories are the clarifying complements to our rituals. 10 days ago, we read a story of risk, sacrifice, and blessing. The word for sacrifice in Hebrew is korban, which doesn't actually mean to give something up. Korban means to draw close, to make an offering that draws you closer to God and God closer to you. When Abraham stood where the Holy of Holies would be built, he drew closer to God by wordlessly offering up on an altar a representation of his greatest aspirations and his fears. After he offered up a goat on the altar in the temple and sent off into the wilderness the scapegoat, the high priest entered the Holy of Holies and risked drawing closer to God in order to speak words seeking expiation and blessing for his people. And as we have gathered together online and in person in our Holy of Holies, how may we as a community draw closer to God on this day of new beginnings? Isaiah tells us we start with our kin, with our relationships, and risk drawing closer to one another through expressions of our vulnerability. We speak aloud to one another our fears, our transgressions. We draw closer to each other through our heartfelt offerings of words. We risk on this day the articulation of our aspirations. So these are my aspirations for us as we enter this new year. They are words that I first shared in writing to you as I began my tenure last summer. But after these many months of waiting for healing, of yearning for an end to this present darkness, they seem ever more vital. May we, as a synagogue community, ever aspiring to sanctity, strive to do better, to do more. Let us channel our learning and our abundant resources into a stream of justice, a mighty river of compassion and righteous action that sweeps away dams of racism and bigotry and engenders in the Bay Area a restorative floodplain of shared prosperity and of equal opportunity. And when we do that, then our light will cleave like the dawn, and our healing will spring up quickly. Then, when we call, God will answer. God will say, Hineni, I am here.
We turn now to page 253 and rise for Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu v'aleinu, ki ein banu masim, aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed, aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed, ve'hoshienu, aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed, aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed, ve'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu v'aleinu, ki ein banu masim. Avinu Malkeinu, Almighty and merciful, answer us with grace, for our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love. Page 256. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, El Rachum v'Chanun, Erech Kapayim, V'Rav Chesed v'Emet, Notzer chesed lalafim, Notzer chesed lalafim, Nosei avon, v'afesha v'chata v'nakeh. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed v'Emet. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun. We're in the middle of page 256.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu,
gadol Adonenu, kadosh v'nora Shemo. Gadlu Adonai iti, uneromema Shemo yachdav. Lech Adonai hagedura v'hagevura v'hatiferet v'hanetzach v'ahor. Ki chol b'shamayim u'va'aretz, ki chol b'shamayim u'va'aretz. Lech Adonai hamamlacha ve'amitnaseh lechol erosh. Al shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim, olam olam omed. Al shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim, olam olam omed. Ve'al avodah ve'al gemilut chasadim, al Torah ve'al avodah ve'al gemilut chasadim. Shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim, olam olam omed. Al shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim, olam olam omed. Yisrael, Yisrael, me'oraita chadu. Yisrael, Yisrael, Torah, Torah, hallelujah. Torah, Torah, hallelujah. Torah, Torah, hallelujah. Torah, hallelujah. Yisrael, Yisrael, me'oraita chadu. Yisrael, Yisrael, Hamda libi, Hosanna ve'ala titarem. Elech 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 Hamda libi, Hosanna ve'ala titarem. Our Torah reading can be found on page 266, these stirring words from Deuteronomy. And our first Torah chanter is Charlie Schwartz. And for the honor of the first Aliyah, we'd like to invite up our Shabbat greeters and our high holiday ushers extraordinaire. Ya'amdu, L'Aliyah Torah. Baruch Adonai HaBarach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher baranu mikol ha'olim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem lifnei Adonai Elohechem. Rashechem shivtechem. Zignechem v'shotrechem. Kol ish Yisrael. Tavchem neshechem begerecha asher bekerem machanecha. Mechotev etzecha ad shoev memecha. Dayabracha bivrit Adonai Elohecha uvalato asher Adonai Elohecha koretimcha hayom.
Asher natan lanu Torah temet, v'chayei olam Malkeinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Good job. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You all can be seated. Our second Torah chanter is Lisa Whitmore. And for the honor of the second Aliyah, we'd like to invite up our teen leaders. And I think we're going to expand it to anyone who has teen in their age. If you are a teen, we'd like to invite you up. Ya'amdu l'Aliyah Shniya. Starting in verse 10, right? Whatever you want to do.
I do want to point out that if you are a teen or if you know teens in your lives, this is Jacob Siegel. He's our current baddie president. So he's a good person to talk to. All right. Ready, guys? Here, come on up. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Baruch Hu Adonai HaBarach. Baruch Adonai HaBarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai HaBarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Leman hakimotcha hayom lo le'am vehu yihye lecha le'Elohim kasher diber lach וכאשר נשבע לאבותיך, לאברהם, ליצחק וליעקב, ולא איתכם לבדכם, אנוכי כורת את הברית הזאת ואת העלה הזאת, כי את אשר ישנו פה עמנו עומד היום לפני אדוני אלוהינו, ואת אשר איננו פה עמנו היום.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah temet v'chayei olam natan b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. You just learned it Thank you all so much. Our third Torah chanter is Lev Miller. Come on up. And for the honor of the third Aliyah, we would love to invite any healthcare professionals who are here today. You have literally saved our lives this past year and a half, and we would love to honor you. So don't be shy. If you work in healthcare, please come forward for the Aliyah. Ya'amdu l'Aliyah Shlishit. Yeah, and you're starting. And we're also going to skip ahead a little bit to chapter 30, verse 15, which is at the very bottom of page 267, if you're following along. Let's find it. Baruch Adonai Barach Leolam Vaed. Baruch Adonai Barach Leolam Vaed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah. Amen.
Amen. Re'ei natati lefanecha hayom et ha'chaim ve'et ha'tov ve'et ha'mavet ve'et ha'ra asher anochi metzavecha hayom le'ahava et Adonai Elohecha lelechet vitrachav v'lishmor mitzvotav v'chukotav u'mishpatav v'chayita v'ravita u'verachecha Adonai Elohecha ba'aretz asher ata v'shema lerishta v'im yifnei levavecha ve'lo tishma v'nidachta ve'ishtechavita le'elohim acherim va'avadachtam higadatim lechem hayom ki avod tovegun lo tarechun yamim al ha'adama asher ata over et Yehoradein lavo shama lerishta.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yasher Koach, thank you so much. In the presence of the Torah, a source of life and strength for our people, we offer a Misha Berach lecholim, a prayer for healing. You can find the words on page 273. And before we begin, if you'd like to share the name of anyone that you are praying for today, please do. Misha Berach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha like to invite up our Magbiha and our Golelet this morning, Alita Longwell and Leslie Mervite, to lift and dress the Torah. We're on page 274, and as the Torah is lifted, please rise. Whenever you're ready. V'zot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai b'yad Moshe. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai lai yai lai lai lai. Yai lai 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 lai. We're gonna toss it over there. Yai lai 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 lai. Lai 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 lai. I'm gonna sit down in the chair. Lai lai lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai lai yai lai lai lai. Yai lai 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 lai. I'd like to invite up our Haftarah chanter this morning, Lisa Rauschwerger. Excuse me. And if you'd like to follow along, the blessings and Haftarah begin on 275.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratza v'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah uv'Moshe avdo ובישראל עמו, ובנביאי האמת והצדק. קירה וגרון אל תחסוך, כשופר הרם קולך, והגד לעמי פתשם, ולבית יעקב חטאותם, ואותי יום יום ידרושון, ודעת דרכי יחפצון, כגוי אשר צדקה עשה, ומשפט אלוהיו לא עזב. ישאלוני משפטי צדק, קרבת אלוהים יחפצון. למה צמנו ולא ראית, עינינו נפשנו ולא תדע. הן ביום צומכם תמצאו חפץ, וכל עצביכם תנגוסו. הן לריב ומצה תצומו, ולהכות באגרוף רשע. לא תצומו כיום, להשמיע במרום קולכם. החזה יהיה צום אבחרהו יום, ענות אדם נפשו, על החוף כאגמון ראשו. ושק ואפר יציע, על הזה תקרא צום, ויום רצון לאדוני. ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, צור כל העולמים, צדיק בכל הדורות, האל הנאמן, האומר ועושה, המדבר ומקיים, שכל דבריו אמת וצדק, על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום הכיפורים הזה, שנתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו, למחילה ולסליחה ולכפרה, לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל, אדוני אלוהינו, אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך. יתברך שמך בפי כל חי, תמיד לעולם ועד, ובדרך אמת וקיים לעד. ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך מוחל וסולח לעוונותינו ולאבות עמו בית ישראל, ומעביר אשמותינו בכל שנה ושנה. מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש ישראל. 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 מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש ישראל ביום הכיפורים.
Amen. Make room for someone else now. Let's turn to page 286. Please join with me in the prayer for our country. God of holiness, we hear your message. Justice, justice, you shall pursue. God of freedom, we hear your charge. Proclaim liberty throughout the land. Inspire us through your teachings and commandments to love and uphold our precious democracy. Let every citizen take responsibility for the rights and freedoms we cherish. Let each of us be an advocate for justice, an activist for liberty, a defender of dignity. And let us champion the values that make our nation a haven for the persecuted, a beacon of hope among the nations. May our actions reflect compassion for all people within our borders and abroad. May our leaders and officials embody the vision of our founders to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We pray for courage and conscience as we aim to support our country's highest values and aspirations, the hard-won rights that define us as a people, the responsibilities that they entail. We pray for all who serve our country with selfless devotion, in peace and in war, from fields of battle to clinics and classrooms, from government to the grassroots, all those whose noble deeds and sacrifice benefit our nation and our world. We are grateful for the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that our founders ascribed to you, our Creator. We pray for their wisdom and moral strength, that we may be guardians of these rights for ourselves and for the sake of all people, now and forever. We turn the page and offer a prayer for the state of Israel. Avinu, please join with me. You who are high above all nations, states, and peoples, Rock of Israel, the one who has saved us and preserved us in life, bless the state of Israel, first flowering of our redemption. Be her loving shield, a shelter of lasting peace. Guide her leaders and advisors by your light of truth. Instruct them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who build and protect our holy land. Deliver them from danger. Crown their efforts with success. Grant peace to the land, lasting joy to all of her people. And together we say, Amen. We turn to page 291 and rise as we return the Torah to the ark.
remain standing as we enter the Vidui, the short confession on page 296.
Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Tavo lefanecha, tefilatenu, ve'al titalam mitchinatenu. Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, tzadikim anachnu, belo chatanu, ava,
Let's read together in the middle of the page. Our God and God of all generations, may our prayers reach your presence. And when we turn to you, do not be indifferent. Adonai, we are arrogant and stubborn, claiming to be blameless and free of sin. In truth, we have stumbled and strayed. We have done wrong.
Ashamnu,
Ashamnu,
Bagadnu,
Bagadnu,
Gazalnu,
Gazalnu,
Dibarnu Dofi,
Dibarnu Dofi,
Dai 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 ya dai 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 Avinu
Avinu,
Vehirshanu
Vehirshanu,
Zadnu
Zadnu,
Hamasnu
Hamasnu,
Tafalnu Sheker
Tafalnu Sheker,
Dai 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 ya dai 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 ya dai 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 Yatnura
Yatnura,
Kizavnu
Kizavnu,
Latnu
Latnu,
Maradnu
Maradnu,
Niatnu
Niatnu,
Sararnu
Sararnu,
Avinu
Avinu,
Pashanu
Pashanu,
Sararnu
Sararnu,
Kishim Yai da 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 da. Rashanu.
Rashanu.
Shichatnu.
Shichatnu.
Tiavnu.
Tiavnu.
Tainu.
Tainu.
Titanu.
Titanu.
Ai da 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 da. Yai da 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 da. Yai da 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 da.
Continue on page 304.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha begalui uvasater, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha besinat chinam.
The ways we have wronged you openly and secretly, and harm we have caused in your world by hating without cause. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha befrikat ol, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'ma'achol umishteh.
The ways we have wronged you by losing self-control,
and harm we have caused in your world through consumption of food and drink.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha begilui arayot, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha be'imutz lev.
The ways we have wronged you through sexual immorality,
and harm we have caused in your world by hardening our hearts.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'neshech u'v'marbit, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'masar u'v'matan.
The ways we have wronged you through greed and exploitation, and harm we have caused in your world through dishonesty in business. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha behirhur halev, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha birchilut. The ways we have wronged you through our innermost thoughts, and harm we have caused in your world through gossip and rumor.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha bekapat shochad, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'chilul Hashem.
The ways we have wronged you by offering or accepting bribes, and harm we have caused in your world by profaning your name in public.
Take some time now on pages 308 and 309 for our own personal cheshbon hanefesh, our own silent reflection and confession.
Page 306.
Lanu,
310. We are your people, and you are our God.
Please be seated.
As we reach the end of our service this morning, a reminder that our afternoon service will begin at 4 o'clock, which will include Yisker probably somewhere around 5 o'clock, and Ne'ilah probably around 6 o'clock. Our afternoon study sessions will have two different rounds, two different sessions. The first from 1:30 to 2:30, and the second from 2:45 to 3:45. Music and meditation will be here in the outdoor chapel at 2:45. You can find a complete list of all of our study sessions on our website at betham.org/event/HHD2021-YK study. Look for the High Holiday section, you'll find it. A reminder that there will be 2 in-person sessions here at Beth Am, along with a number of other study sessions that you can access via Zoom, and all of those links are on the website as well. So call everyone, if you are fasting an easy and meaningful fast. If you are not, may your souls be uplifted on this day of reflection and prayer. Either way, we'll see you this afternoon. Have a good day.